Union members can no longer be involved with just our movement. We are going to have to step up to the plate and be involved in the other progressive movements that's going on right now, that's brewing right now. And they are fighting for the same social change that we are fighting for. And the people I'm talking about is the occupation. The Occupy Baltimore, the Occupy Boston, the Occupy Oakland. And I think that we all know the Occupy Wall Street. No longer can we sit on the sidelines, but we have to get in the game. What I would like to finish with is a quote that I've always heard. If you're not sitting at the table, then you're on the menu. And brothers and sisters,
so let's give it up for the panel one more time. I think you've seen that when people take an opportunity, there's 3 young workers, including myself, that wasn't involved in the labor movement before, but an organization, a program, a person invested in us, and now we've become champions of labor. I love that I'm a union member. I love that I have that card in my pocket. I wear it proudly, and I tell other young people being in a union is the best place to be, because I'm not part of just my union. I'm part of a community that's 12.4 million strong and growing. And we start talking about what are we doing to build wins and expand the labor movement and expand the progressive movement. So I think let's give it up for the crowd again, then we're going to open up for Q&A. The gentleman in the back.
Colors was created by the Windows on the World people. It's a worker-owned restaurant down on Lafayette Street. And so I think we should engage in that part of it. And just to let you know how worker cooperatives are going, Christine Quinn, who is going to run for mayor, saw that it was a big enough issue that she gave $150,000 to the Center for Family Life in Brooklyn, which has been an incubator for immigrant women to create worker cooperatives. So I would like to, if you guys are interested, just people come up to me and I'll give you the address and everything. The second point is on your issue of values in the labor movement. So what I want to ask are, what are people actually willing to do to be inconvenienced? And in that question, it's how do the buying decisions that people make affect the lives of people globally? And by that I mean for every laptop, every digital camera, every BlackBerry, every Xbox, and every cell phone, they couldn't be made without a mineral called coltan. That mineral is only mined in one area in the entire globe. That's the Congo. So if people stop buying these instruments until the people in the Congo are actually fairly remunerated for their work, you'd actually have a labor movement that would be much more global in scope and affect people whose lives are actually being pretty well destroyed by our convenience of electronic equipment.
I've actually been arrested before. It got expunged though, because my family, anyways. That's, as someone who has student loans, as someone who has 2 jobs, as someone who, I have all these things, like I want nothing more than to do it, but at the same time, like, until all of these society things that hold me down as a person are fixed tomorrow, there's like a lot on the line. Like how do you navigate that when you know that you need to kind of give it all up and take the big risk, but you also don't want to like pull down your entire family who, co-signed on your loans and people who depend on you in these structures that we have holding you down. Like how do I do that? Because I'll do it.
One thing that I've noticed in the New York scene is a great willingness to get arrested as symbolic disobedience, civil disobedience. So I would just like some comments on what, because I feel like, Stephen, you're talking more about like direct action, actually standing in the way of production or consumption or whatever. So maybe some talking points or even more explanation to us folks who are organizing in New York about how to explain the difference between symbolic civil disobedience and direct action.
So I think in a way, I didn't catch everybody's name, but your name was? Kate. And Nat. I think those questions in some ways are completely interrelated, because there's symbolic arrests, which often isn't even an arrest in this country because you arrange with the police to take you around the corner and let you go, which is very different than an arrest that, and I don't want to minimize getting arrested because it is a big deal, and when it's not choreographed, it's not pleasant, and we shouldn't be glib about it. And, we'll hear what Nalini's story is later about what the hell happened at the airport or whatever with her. But so I think the reason they're interrelated is because if we have a strategy where the arrest is tied both to showing resistance but trying to win a victory, then it makes more sense to take the risk. And also where if it's not just symbolic, so for example, I'm not saying that 1 student or 1,000 students should refuse to pay their loan, because that would just be sort of suicidal, but can you build it to the scale, and going back to where Kirsten started on the theme of bargaining, where where your risk is actually less, because lots of people are doing it. And so I think that's, what I'd say on the sort of difference between the two is that if people were to adopt a strategy saying that millions of people losing their homes are bad for them individually, but bad for society collectively, and that it's part of what's dragging the economy down, and therefore we're willing to risk arrest to defend those homes, I think that feels like a very different arrest than some of the silliness, like, breaking windows or whatever. And I do want to stress in all of this that I think it has to be grounded in nonviolence, or it will be silly, and it's just sort of fantasy land. So I guess my answer to you is, like, the risk is worth taking if there's some kind of logic behind it that moves a ball down the road. But the final thing I'd say is I do think all of us are called and challenged on this. And I saw a film the other night that was about the civil rights movement, and the scene in Birmingham, we know the history, but we forget it, of literally kids, like, they didn't even arrest them quite, they just opened the doors to the police vans and ushered them in. And people all talked about being arrested at 14 in Birmingham, and a bunch of people all said it's the first time in their life they felt free. Because their entire life, similar to you, they were saying, if I break the rules, if I do this, then society will come down on me, and that's how they were held in place. And and there was a wonderful woman who was the youngest person arrested on the there, who was then at this event describing her life was transformed because when she confronted her biggest fear and got over it, that freed her from all the things you're talking about. So I do think it's strategic, it's smart. It also, we can't underestimate the reaction of other people when we engage in nonviolent arrest, how it pushes things. So I could go on and on, we'll have a workshop, but I think they're related, totally. And I don't know if you...
Actually, I was going to answer one of the other questions. You asked about how can you take the risk? We all have a lot of responsibilities with job, our family. There's different actions that you can take. All the time, there's something going on there, you get alerts. You can make calls to 311 or to the mayor's office about something that's going on that they wanted to. There was actually an action to call the mayor's office not to evict people from Occupy Wall Street. So there's actions you could take a part of. You can sign petitions. I mean, they may seem small in scale, but you have to start somewhere. And you have to get involved. Even if you don't have as much time as you want, you could at least make an effort to go to some kind of community board meeting if you're not a part of a union. Or if you are a part of a union, go to a union meeting. There's general membership meetings, informational sessions. And there's times where the politicians may just pop up, and they like hearing from the community because, let's be honest, it is about politics. This is all, and everything that's happening right now, it's not about money, it's not about the loss of jobs, it's about 2012 election. Let's not forget that. It's about the fact that there's so many problems and issues that are happening across the nation, from collective bargaining rights being stripped to people, the unemployment rate going through the roof, but it's really about the 2012 election. And who's going to be the next president? Will Barack Obama still be in House, or are they trying to replace him? So I think when younger people start to look at the actual bigger picture, then it all starts to make sense, but they do need to take part in smaller actions, like phone calling, like petitioning, community board meetings. Any type of action is one step in the right direction.
Yeah, just something real short that I totally agree with Natasha, that we all play a role. We all play some type of role, whether it's just, like she said, it's so many people in my family that just call or ask what's going on, having that conversation due to the fact that the Occupy Wall Street movement is creating a conversation and they don't know what's going on. So they call the people that are more informed or follow the different things, and they get that opinion instead of some other person spinning it. You know, sometimes you can do creative things, the Twitter, the Facebook update, a blog, a YouTube video in support of the Occupy movement. Anything to just do, because we all play a role is what I want to say, and that's just touching on what Natasha stated.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you can address within the existing union movement what I think is a long-term lack of real coordination, collegial coordination and communications, so that some unions at different points in time get to have their way, whether or not it's good for everybody as a whole. An example being construction workers who are subject to ups and downs in the labor market, when there should be a profound, steady stream of work in a whole variety of things there, so that we get ridiculous things like expensive stadias and the like that nobody needs. And what's being presented completely falsely as a labor environmental movement split over the Keystone XL pipeline, which we absolutely don't need in this country for a whole variety of issues, which doesn't exist, but the media is not giving the story what it is. So I'm wondering if you could comment this lack of internal communication and collaboration, and how labor presents itself to the outside world.
The question that I have is, like most of you said, that you really didn't have a union background or upbringing. For those who don't have that, what issues do you address or do you bring up to get people involved? I didn't have a union background, but because of my job, I'm now affiliated with Local 1549, and I'm actually involved. But for those who don't know, and they don't have a history or they don't know what's going on, how do you reach out to them? How do you get them involved? Because everybody that it's affecting doesn't necessarily have to be union affiliated. So what do you do? What do you bring to them to say, to reach them on a personal level, to get them interested in the things that are affecting everybody as a whole?
So my name is Michael McCaslin. I'm the organizing chair for Local 375 in DC 37. And everything you guys said is right on point. I mean, we have to use this as an opportunity to bring people from outside the union in, spark young people, get that energy moving. And this is the opportunity for our lifetime to make a difference. I have a lot of friends who, I'm from North Carolina. I have a lot of friends from North Carolina who moved to the city, corporate lawyers, consultants, smart people, but they're not involved with the labor movement. And I had dinner with a friend last night. She's very liberal, she's very progressive, but she's a consultant. And we're talking about, we got to get on this Occupy. We got to get people, you should come with me. And we're talking, she says, well, the unions are good, but there's a lot of other shady stuff that they do. The public perception for people who are outside the fold, as this is a common question, but they have this different perspective. And I said, well, no, workers' rights. I give her anecdotal stories, and she starts to move. But really, I mean, she has a sound foundation that the unions, they do some good, but they do more bad than good. So my question is, given that lens, is as an organizer, we have a limited amount of energy and time. Should I spend my time bringing people in who are already there, who are already halfway there? I just got to get them out on the street to do these actions, or do I spend a lot of my time, which I would argue is a more effective goal if we were successful, to convince these people who are outside the fringe and these people who are not, in the union fold? Where should I concentrate my efforts? Bringing numbers from people who are almost 1 foot in the door and get both feet in, or do I try to bring people in who are both feet are outside the door?
So I'm going to keep this brief, but I don't really feel like we're addressing the reality why there's less and less young worker involvement, which is the fact that we've been frozen out of unionism because of hiring freezes and things of that nature. So I'm wondering, with that in mind, what type of strategies or policies can be developed so that this is not what's continued? Because I feel like the larger national policy is basically to just let unions die out because there's going to be less and less new membership. And they do that through national and state and local policies. So with that, like I said, with that in that framework, in that context, how is it that the AFL-CIO and locals and everyone else can start to really bring in new membership in a different way than just getting them activated once they're hired.
I think that I'm gonna try my best to remember all the questions, but I think that you hit on a point. You said, how could you do you work on the people that's unionized, or do you work on the people that's non-unionized? I think that you work on both. What we were doing in Baltimore City, we actually started that young worker group, which is why I'm so impressed and so enthused about the young workers growing across the states, due to the fact that when we invited all people, because we wanted everybody to learn what we are about. We wanted to learn what everybody else was about. And the thing is, in a progressive movement, you have college students, you have different people that, like you said, you sat at dinner and you were sitting next to a progressive. But if she joined in that conversation and saw what other things that the union movement did, maybe that would enhance her education and different things like that. But I think that the young worker groups that's starting up or spiring up in different states and different cities are playing a big role in trying to educate the younger people. Like I said, you stated about the hiring freezes. I think that that's a pretty big point. I blog a lot, and one of the things I like to blog about is the different tier system, the different attacks on young workers that's going on. Because, you know, when they say, hey, the people with 10 years or less are going to go under this new pension system instead of and take care of the old workers, they're screwing the younger people. And that's not just that, but what I tell the younger people is the reason why they do that is because we let them do that. When I look at the people that's voting, the people that's voting are age of 45 and older in Baltimore City. I'm not sure about what state you are. And we just had early voting. On one of the early voting days, it was only 8 people between the ages of 18 to 24 that actually participated and exercised their right to vote. So I say that one of the quotes that I said, you know, we can no longer sit on the sidelines. We got to get in the game.
I guess I could answer some of this because that's actually what I'm tasked to do. So, to your question, I graduated from the University of Michigan, degree in political science and history, had fellowships at prestigious institutions, and was one of those liberals or progressives that are like, unions, I don't know, maybe, I guess, not my cup of tea, right? But that's because no one educated me on the value of a union or what union members do. And I think, especially in right-to-work states, we have to communicate trade unionism in a way that doesn't talk about pensions and salaries and the material stuff. You know, like, Occupy is so successful because you can look at it and you see an injustice and you're like, I got to be there. I got to stand with that. In Wisconsin, I used to run a youth organization called the Roosevelt Institute, and it was about engaging college students to write public policy. And a lot of them didn't understand what was going on in Wisconsin. They couldn't tell you the difference between right to work. They couldn't tell you what collective bargaining was and why unions were of any value, right? But they saw a grave injustice and it's like, you can't do this to people. It's our responsibility to educate. You know, we can't just say that young people don't know enough about unions when I look in this room and there's not enough young people in this room. So, like, my mom took me to everything that she went to, if it was, everything. And I didn't have an opportunity not to be educated on women's issues and LGBTQ issues and immigrant rights issues and labor issues. And every time there's a conference or a summit or something, bring some of these non-union people to what's going on and be in their space too. And the labor movement, especially through the Young Worker Program, we want Corey's Young Worker Group in Baltimore to reach out to communities that are non-union, to talk about this is what a union member is, and this is the work that we do, you know? And, you know, to also talk about what you're saying and being frozen out, the labor movement, and I can tell you this personally, having interacted with the officers, know that that's a problem. And one, we need more jobs across the board, period. Right? So there's America Wants to Work campaign, there's a President's Jobs program. We need to get more jobs out there. But we also need to work within our unions to encourage them and say investing in young people is investing in the long-term viability of the labor movement. And that's happening at the very top. And the success that I think that came from the Next Up Summit, where we brought 800 young people in and sent them all back, for them to talk to their leadership and being like, we can be dynamic, we can be out of the box, we can be relevant, and we can also recruit and bring more people into the fold. So it's a commitment, an unwavering commitment to making sure that there's a long-term viability of the labor movement, which I guarantee you is there in the building, and is there at the executive council meetings, and we have to push it at state feds and CLCs and every union, you know, across the board, humanly possible. at the same time, we also need to be in those spaces where we haven't been. So, I'm going to be working with a lot of youth organizations coming up. We're going to be talking about voter ID, voter disenfranchisement in the 2012 election. If at the end of the next 5 to 10 years, if a young person in college doesn't know about the AFL-CIO's Young Worker Program, then it would have been a failure. They need to see us like the way they see Campus Progress or any other youth organization, SLAP and USSA and a bunch of other organizations. We have to be there. We have to organize internally.